Okay, well, when I came here in '61, I was supposed to teach English, but during the summer, one of the art teachers left. So I was recruited to teach art because I had a double major. So I walked into someone's program, which was already existing. So you would have students who were in Art 1, 2, 3, 4, but Art 4 tended to be independent study. So they were on projects by that time. If you could get a kid to stay in art 4 years, it was a miracle, usually 2 years. And it was pretty much, teaching them the basics about art and guiding them so that they would come up with their own projects or take the project and make it their way. And I think that's probably what was best about all the Trump programs, is that you had to run with it. So while we didn't do large groups per se, which is part of the Trump plan, we would be divided by the age of the student and the number of years he or she was in the program. And so you might have kids working on pottery, you might have other kids working on painting, drawing, all these different things. So they would be going on the same time. And so it really was nice because it was kind of like helter-skelter, it's like so many things were going on at the same time. And even then, we were trying to do things that would involve the rest of the students here so that if they were going to do art projects for an English class, we could put some input in. So it was exciting, but it wasn't the Trump plan so much as because seminar doesn't translate into a studio class. Well, '61, pretty much, we were facing the problems of what was going to happen with it. And one of the things that was very scary is there was still the draft system. And so every year you waited to see what numbers were going to come up. And as long as you were 2A, that meant that you were protected as teachers. But it did get to a point once where the secretary to the superintendent forgot to send in the fact that we were teaching. And so everybody went 1A. And, we were ready to kill her because, and a couple of people did have to go because of that. 2 of the teachers here, you couldn't get out of it. I was lucky during Vietnam to be too old. So I avoided that. But, students were beginning to get radicalized politically. And so they're really involved in the whole idea. I can remember the kids going down to the rallies in the city and narrowly avoiding getting arrested. Sit-ins and so kinds of things like that. And
oh my God. Wow.
I went to Woodstock, and so, protest time, it was really kind of interesting. And the first one I met was a student who was set up a little, I don't know what it was, his own little stand, so he was selling marijuana at there. And I said, it's time for you to leave because you're a teacher. And you don't need this kind of publicity.
Oh my goodness.
But it really was the most exciting time at Ridgewood. After 1974, when Back to the Basics movement came into education, that destroyed the Trump program here. The whole idea was that math and science were more important than anything else, and kids should be spending their time in there. And that's when we changed from an elective program where you could elect to take 2 years or 3 years or something, till everybody finally had to take all 4 years of all 4 subjects. So that really destroyed the program. But it was exciting. I mean, we did exciting things. Kids put on programs. I took 20 kids to a fallout shelter where they were going to spend 20 hours in the fallout shelter under actual conditions. So we went there, and it was a room in a bank which could hold 40 people, and there were 40 people, my 20 students, and then people from the community. I do remember there were 2 nuns from the area. And the first thing that happened in there was really under actual conditions. So we were going to eat survival biscuits and old water. That was going to be our food. And what bothered people the most was there was a screened off area in one corner, and that's where you had to go if you had to eliminate. And you know, people don't like to be in bathrooms together, especially if there's a nun behind the screen. So every hour on the hour, they would tell us what was happening, because each hour was a day, simulated day. And one woman, after about the 7th hour, said, I forgot to bring my insulin, because she was diabetic. And since we had no insulin, you couldn't stop the program, we had to throw her out and let her die. You know, when you're working under those conditions, and at the 8th hour, they turned out the lights. And I knew about it, but people panic in the dark because they thought, we're going to be in here without light. So these were real simulated conditions. And it went on, and you know, there were tears, and there was trials, and the lights went back on, but they were still broadcasting. And then we reached the 20th day, 20 hours, and we're ready to leave, and they broadcast, the bombing has started again. We had a lot of tears. But see, that was the whole idea, to give people real life experiences through their education. They wrote about it, you know, all kinds of things. Yeah, well, I went to Virginia, and I went to North Carolina, schools that were thinking of going to this program. You know, we had 2,000 visitors the first year of the Trump plan. There were people marching through all the time because we got such great publicity, you know, that we were breaking the lockstep of education. That was really an important part of the Trump plan, to break the lockstep of education. Lockstep means that you were going to be tied into a time each day. But when your day wasn't divided by 40-minute periods, but 20, 40, 60, and 80 minutes, depending on what you needed for that class. So a cooking lab could be easily an hour. You needed to finish. In other schools, you'd had to plan things, you know, 40 minutes or 46 minutes. So we didn't have to do that. And every class didn't meet every day, and no bells rang. So at every 20-minute period, somebody was going to move somewhere doing something. You had to just remember everything by your schedule. And since every day wasn't the same, you really needed to know every day what you were doing. It got worse, because they decided about 6 years into the program that we would get rid of the lockstep program of 5-day program. Because with the 5-day program, when you were scheduled for different things each day, if there was a holiday, you'd lose that day, because you know, be day one, I mean, Monday, Tuesday, and then Wednesday was gone. Well, Wednesday was gone forever. So they changed to the 6-day schedule. And every day was a number. Day 1, day 2, day 3, day 4, day 5, and day 6. So if you missed a day for a holiday, and it was going to be day 3 when you came back, you didn't miss any, because it was day 3 the day you came back, so we never missed any. The problem was when you talked to the people on the outside, and they ask you what day they could meet you. Well, how about if we meet on day 3? You know, because you weren't looking whether it was Tuesday or anything like that. A lot of people in the outside world, and I thought there was pretty much outside world, didn't know what we were doing. It was so exciting, though. You just wanted to be here, and you know, we were in the humanities and the math science. Those were the 2 big divisions. And we met a lot. I mean, we were meeting at night and planning programs, and everybody planned the program. So if the people in English were doing the Pilgrim Century, I might deliver an enrichment lecture on what was life like at that time. So we were all feeding into each other's programs. You really felt like you were part of the program. Well, when we look to the period of the late 60s and think about the faculty was all very young, and most of the people were not married. I mean, you know, we were 22 to 24, and so our social life was involving the people that we were teaching with, you know. So we had a huge bowling team, and everybody was on the bowling team. We went to the same bar. I know teachers didn't drink, but we went there to see people drinking. But 2 of the teachers got involved. Unfortunately, the male teacher had not bothered to end his marriage, so he moved out of his home and moved into the school in a storage room between 2 of the divisible auditoriums. And it seems everybody knew about it, but nobody said anything. But, you know, it was kind of his home for 3 months. And, you know, talking about strange times, you know. This was like a beehive. And so the whole community was dependent on each other, and everybody kind of had his or her part in the program and accepted everything that was, you know. The only thing that administrators were really divided, you know. There were good administrators, and then there were ones we didn't like. And I remember being told by one administrator, you know, we were very avant-garde. I wore an ascot to school instead of a tie. And he said, "Would you not wear that thing anymore to school?" And considering the source, I said, glad I would not, you know, because his other job was in charge of the athletic program. And I was not setting a good example. But I didn't set a good example very often. I'm still not. Oh, yeah, well, listen, lots of crazy things have happened here. When Jack Ruby was buried in West Lawn Cemetery down the way, one of our students, very enterprising, dug up Jack Ruby's tombstone and took it home. And it was in his garage. So, you know, infamy was everywhere. I mean, you know, I remember one of the things that I really liked so much about the 60s is most of us would sponsor a class, and homecoming was really unbelievable. We did floats like you wouldn't believe. I mean, they were works of art. And kids were really involved here in everything. It wasn't just academics or sports. Everybody was involved, you know, and everybody went to all the games, and, you know, we had real rivalries, and I think that's probably, and the parents were enormously supportive, or that wouldn't have worked. And they were buying into craziness. No education was like Ridgewood's. And so they bought into it and supported it. And you know, we were involved as we did a money raiser, the parents did, called Corns a Poppin'. and it was a talent show.
Any,
I remember exactly where I was when Kennedy was killed. Exactly. I was in the art room. And all of a sudden someone came in and said, Kennedy's been shot. And this place was a tomb. It was just, it was like nobody could think, the last president who got shot was probably McKinley. And
wow.
I mean, it was devastating here. It was the first time, or like the first student who died. It was just. Of course, we were at the drug generation. Remember?
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it showed its bloody head here. I suppose marijuana was a big thing somewhere, but here it was acid. And I remember kids dropping a tab into distilled water and then dropping it into their eyes so they would have hallucinations, visual hallucinations. I used to say, if I tied a string to some of these kids, they would float to the ceiling. But it was the most exciting time, the late 60s, up till 1972, when they changed the educational program. I mean, those kids were brilliant. And they were choosing schools unknown to this blue-collar community, Kids were going to Harvard. Can you believe that? Eastern schools. It's exciting.